My heart pounded in my chest as we pulled up to the new house. The moment we moved in, I had this strange feeling that something was off. The thick tree line that surrounded our property seemed to hold secrets, and in the darkness, I could have sworn I saw a pair of glowing red eyes peering back at me. Every night, those eyes seemed to draw closer, and their eerie glow grew brighter. I tried to ignore the feeling of unease, thinking it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. Yet night after night, the red-eyed monster seemed to inch its way closer to the house. My parents brushed off my concerns, chalking it up to the stress of moving to a new place. But I knew I wasn't imagining things. The monster was real, and it was getting bolder. I couldn't sleep, consumed with fear and curiosity about the creature lurking in the trees. Each night, I'd stand by my window, watching as the eyes stared back at me from the shadows. They seemed to beckon, calling me to come outside. But I couldn't bring myself to leave the safety of my room. Finally, I couldn't bear it any longer. I mustered the courage to tell my parents again, this time with tears streaming down my face. They exchanged concerned glances, but reassured me that there was nothing to worry about. My dad even offered to investigate the tree line the next day to put my fears to rest. The following morning, my dad ventured into the woods. I stood anxiously at the edge of the property, praying that he wouldn't find anything. But deep down, I knew that the red-eyed monster was real. My fears were confirmed when he returned, his face pale and his eyes filled with disbelief. "I saw nothing out there," he said, trying to reassure me. "It must have just been your imagination." That night, as darkness enveloped the house, I heard a faint scratching sound coming from the front door. My heart skipped a beat, and I knew the monster was now trying to break in. I rushed to my parents' bedroom, waking them up with a sense of urgency. "Please, you have to believe me. It's here. The monster is outside," I pleaded. My parents exchanged worried glances and decided to check the door. As they approached, I stayed back, fear gripping my entire being. When my dad peered out through the peephole, he gasped, his face draining of color. My mum let out a terrified scream. "All I see are bright red eyes," my dad stammered. The sight of those glowing red eyes paralyzed us with fear. My mum quickly grabbed her phone to call for help, while my dad grabbed a flashlight and went outside to confront whatever was out there. I stayed inside, unable to move, my eyes locked on the peephole, half expecting something terrible to burst through the door. As my dad ventured into the darkness, the red eyes seemed to retreat, fading back into the woods. I could hear branches rustling, but I couldn't see anything from my vantage point. My mum kept the police on the line, relaying the situation to them as we waited anxiously for my dad to return. After what felt like an eternity, my dad came back, his face a mix of confusion and frustration. "There's nothing out there," he said, his voice tinged with unease. The police arrived shortly after and conducted a thorough search of the area, but they found no signs of any intruders or monsters. They chalked it up to a possible animal or a prankster, but I knew the truth. The red-eyed monster was real, and it was clever enough to evade capture. Over the next few days, my parents decided to install security cameras around the property to ease my fears. They assured me that they were doing everything they could to keep us safe. Still, the red-eyed monster remained elusive, only appearing when it knew it wouldn't be caught. I couldn't escape the feeling that the creature was somehow connected to the house, that it was tied to some dark secret hidden in its walls. I began researching the history of the property, hoping to find some answers. That's when I stumbled upon a forgotten tale from years ago. Decades ago, a young girl had lived in our house with her family. She had gone missing one night, and her disappearance was never solved. The local legends spoke of a red-eyed monster that haunted the woods, abducting children who strayed too far from their homes. The more I read, the more convinced I became that the red-eyed monster had something to do with the missing girl. I shared my findings with my parents, and they finally started to take my fears seriously. Together, we decided to dig deeper into the history of the property. One night, unable to sleep, I heard a soft voice calling out to me from outside. It was a gentle, melodic sound that seemed to pull me towards the tree line. Against my better judgment, I found myself following the voice, drawn like a moth to a flame. As I got closer to the woods, the red-eyed monster emerged from the shadows, but this time it didn't seem menacing. Its eyes still glowed, but they held a sadness that tugged at my heartstrings. As I stood before it, fear gave way to compassion. Life returned to normal after that. My parents, who had been skeptical at first, acknowledged the presence of something inexplicable in our new house. They were grateful that I had helped bring closure to the spirit that had haunted the property for so long. Though we no longer saw the red-eyed monster, I still felt a connection to the girl's spirit. I knew that she had found her way to a better place, and that thought brought me comfort. We continued to live life returned to an eerie semblance of normalcy after my eyes had settled with compassion. The red-eyed monster had disappeared, and the tree line seemed peaceful again. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister still lingered in the shadows, watching and waiting. Strange occurrences began to happen around the house. Objects would move on their own, doors creaked open in the dead of night, and chilling whispers echoed through the halls. My parents tried to dismiss these happenings as mere coincidences, but I knew better. The malevolent presence was still there, lurking, biding its time. As days turned into weeks, the activity in the house escalated. The once welcoming atmosphere now felt suffocating and oppressive. I would wake up to find claw-like scratches on my bedroom door, as if something desperate was trying to get in. The red-eyed monster might have vanished, but its malevolence seemed to have seeped into every corner of the house. Sleep became impossible, and when I did manage to drift off, nightmares plagued me. Visions of the red-eyed monster chasing me through the dark woods filled my mind, and I would wake up drenched in cold sweat. With each passing day, the haunting intensified, driving my family to the brink of despair. My parents, no longer able to deny the reality of our situation, sought help from every paranormal expert they could find. Mediums, ghost hunters, and priests were all brought in, but none could fully rid the house of the malevolent entity. The spirit's presence seemed to grow stronger with each failed attempt to banish it. We were trapped in a nightmare we couldn't wake up from. The malevolent entity seemed to feed off our fear and desperation. It reveled in tormenting us, pushing us to the brink of madness. Every night, the whispers grew louder, the shadows darker, and the air thicker with an oppressive energy. I felt the girl's spirit, the one I had once helped find peace, withdraw from me. The darkness had corrupted her, turning her into something far more sinister. She was no longer the lost soul seeking solace, but a vengeful spirit seeking retribution. As the haunting reached its peak, we couldn't escape the feeling that the malevolent presence was building towards something dreadful. One night, I found myself drawn to the tree line again, the same gentle voice calling out to me. But this time, it was different, laced with malice. My parents tried to stop me, but I was too entranced, too desperate to understand what was happening. As I reached the woods, I saw her, the girl's spirit, standing among the trees, her eyes no longer the warm blue they had become, but a deep, terrifying shade of crimson.